we've got Congress, but why do we need a president? What do y'all think? Military?
He helps with like all the money and stuff.
He helps with the money, right? But can Congress not do those things? They could, right? Theoretically. Why do we have a president?
Because they above the Democrat Republican.
Okay, so they're in charge of their party.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, there has to be someone to make the big decisions when they need to be made. Does that make sense? Somebody's got to make these decisions. We can't just like have them go out there. Put your mask on. Okay. Yeah. I was talking to Jason. Put your mask on. Someone has to be in charge. There's got to be an end-all, be-all, right? Now, it'd be a great idea if I said, hey, all the teachers are just in charge of how the school runs, right? But you got to have a principal, because we got to have somebody to tell us yes or no, right or wrong, what to do, right? You've got to have an elected official. We've got to have an executive. All right, the 2008 financial crisis. Y'all were probably being born in 2008 or something, so let me explain it. Basically, banks gave out loans to buy houses, and they gave out way too many loans for way too cheap, okay? And those are called mortgages, and the entire housing market crashed because they would give like somebody who had terrible credit and a bad bank account, and they would give them a big loan for their mortgage. Well, they didn't pay that mortgage back, right? So now the banks are owning all these houses, and the value of that property went down. It plummeted. And the stock market crashed, the housing market crashed, and Americans lost billions of dollars. So what could we do about it, right? What did we do in that situation? Did the government fail? No. The banks failed. Banks and the government are completely separate, right? So this happened, and hopefully you can hear it. Can you hear this?
The only way to save Main Street, so says the president.
The house of cards was much bigger. Started to stretch beyond just Wall Street.
That's how the president defended one of the largest proposed financial rescue plans in U.S. history.
When one card started to go, we were worried about the whole deck going down.
It will cost hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars. Treasury Department and congressional staffers are working through the weekend, hammering out the details. The president's plan would allow the Treasury to buy up to $700 billion worth of bad loans, like many of those subprime mortgage deals. That means banks would be back in business, able to make loans again. Wall Street already voted in favor of the plan, recovering from record lows by the end of trading Friday. But those bad debts then go on the American public's tab. Congress will have to raise the legal limit on the national debt from $10.6 trillion to $11.3 trillion. If all those borrowers pay their mortgages, the government, and therefore the taxpayer, gets the money back.
Okay.
If they default,
all the mumbo-jumbo aspect of that isn't as important as noting the banks failed, and they had to go to the president and say, what do we do about this? And in that instance, TJ, listen. In that instance, George Bush said, we're going to have to bail them out. The federal government's going to have to take on that money that they lost, okay? Could Congress come together and vote on that? No. Do we have time to assemble all of Congress? No, right? There had to be a person to make that big decision when the time comes. That's one of the biggest things you need to know about the executive. Does that make sense? Hey, you got to have one person, right? 9/11 happened, okay? We got attacked. What are we going to do about it? Who do you turn to? President, right? We don't get all of Congress together, 600 of them by the end of the day, 535 people. We don't get all of them together and vote on it, right? Sometimes you got to have somebody to make that decision. So, what are our qualifications to be the president? The president must be a natural-born citizen. That means the president has to be born in the United States, okay? The president has to be 35 years old, a resident of the country for 14 years, and this is all outlined in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 4. So what exactly can the President of the United States do? What are the powers of the President? This whole unit's going to be on the executive. Last unit was on the legislative, on Congress. Wrap that up. We had a test. Now we're moving on to the President. So what are the powers? Okay, he's got executive powers. He's the head of the executive branch. The President and the executive, that's the same thing. He's got executive powers. The President executes, enforces, and interprets all federal law. Ordinance power means he has the power to issue executive orders to carry out constitutional duties, and those orders have the force of a law. Okay? So if Donald Trump needs to pass something real quick and he doesn't want to go through Congress, he can do an executive order. Now, it'll pass immediately. It has the effect of a law, but it does have a limitation on how long it can stay a law. Congress can immediately vote it down, right? But that whole bill to law process the president can kind of come in and say, you know what, right now we need this. This is an executive order. I'm going to order this law be passed because I'm the president and I say so. Barack Obama did a lot of executive orders at the end of his presidency. Donald Trump did some here and there. But executive orders are, usually you don't want them every five, like he's not going to be like, I'm making an executive order, to stop oil drilling or something. That would never happen. It would be because of it. Like coronavirus, there were a lot of executive orders to give people money back. More executive powers. He has appointment, and he appoints what are called cabinet members, ambassadors, diplomats, it says cabinet members twice, heads of agencies, federal judges, military officers. A lot of these people are appointed. We don't elect everyone. Okay, so when it comes time to fill some of these positions, the president does it. We're going to get into the details of what all that means later. Just know that he has that power to appoint. So all your federal judges, all the people who are ruling on these election cases, all of that, they're appointed by the president, hundreds of them. Diplomatic powers. What does it mean to be a diplomat? Anybody remember? Diplomacy is just how you carry yourself to other countries. Okay, what is our policy with other countries? How are we going to interact with them? So diplomatic power would be like what in the world's going on with this daggone webcam? Okay, sorry. So he has the power to make treaties with foreign nations. Okay, they got to be approved. Executive agreements, different than executive orders. Basically, a president of the United States and another head of state, another president can kind of make a deal, right? And that's kind of one of the powers that he has. And power of recognition, the president recognizes foreign nations and grants them legitimacy. So if we have, let's say, a new country that forms, let's say France splits into two, who says that new country is a country, right? You can only be a country if other people agree to it. Like when the United States split and we had the Civil War, we became the Union and the Confederacy, the Confederate States of America. Unless other countries identified us as that, it don't matter, right? Like I could say, all right, I'm my own country right here in this classroom. This is my country. None of the federal government rules apply to me. That don't work. But if the rest of the world was like, yep, he's a country, right? Then I'm going to become one. Military powers. Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Almost unlimited power to use troops without a declaration of war. Can do whatever he wants. Controls the whole army. And here's the War Powers Resolution Act, 1973. We'll skip over that. And he has legislative powers. What are some of the legislative powers of the president? Who could tell me? What's one of the biggest things? What? He can make laws through executive orders, right? But what else? What about the legislative process? A bill becoming a law. What role does the president play? He can veto it. What's the other thing the president does? You said what? Approve it. Signs it into law, right? So recommends legislation, blah, blah, blah. So he'll say, okay, Senate, we need this. Can you pass it, right? Checks on the legislative branch. So the legislative branch doesn't have too much power, he can check their power. Remember I talked about for a pickup basketball game, you check, right? So he's going to check their power, and that is done by signing bills into law, right? Vetoing. He can also do nothing, which we talked about, and he can pocket veto, which means a bill dies if Congress ends its session within 10 days, blah, 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 blah. That's very rare. And he can call special sessions to Congress. So if Congress is not supposed to be meeting, the president can be like, meet up. We got shit to talk about, okay? He's got judicial powers. Now, this is Neil Gorsuch and Donald Trump. Donald Trump appointed Neil Gorsuch to the United States Supreme Court. He's appointed 3 people in his presidency. He can pardon, legal forgiveness of a crime. So if you did a crime, don't matter what it is, the president has the ability to pardon you. Donald Trump's been big on pardoning people during his presidency. Amnesty, blanket pardon to a group of violators, as in if you didn't want to go to war and that was a crime and you dodged the draft to the Vietnam War, President Carter said, you know what, all of those people, they just get immunity. We're not going to worry about it. That war was a bad call, okay? And selecting judges, especially Supreme Court justices. We'll talk about this later, but the Supreme Court's very powerful. It's the 3rd branch of government. And the people who serve on it serve for life. When one dies, whoever's the current president at that time appoints another person, okay? So the more people you appoint during your presidency, usually that's seen as the better. Like George Bush appointed 1, Barack Obama appointed 2 in his 8 years, and Donald Trump has appointed 3 in his 4 years. So he's had a lot in the grand scheme of things. Checks on presidential power, 2-term limit, you know that. Congressional investigations, impeachment powers, impeachment trials, and the media as a watchdog. We're going to go over all of that. And we're going to talk about last thing, which is the roles of the president. Wake up, JT. Eyes up. Come on. I know it's not that great, but we're going to get into it because I got to. Okay, that's Obama and some gymnast that's from like 2012 or something. I don't know. Okay, this guy's the president, George H.W. Bush, George Bush's dad. And he says, I'm the president, but I'm also the chief of state, the chief executive, the chief diplomat, the commander-in-chief, the chief legislator, blah, 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 right? He wears many hats. Like, you could be called, Tayshawn, you could be called, I'm Tayshawn, I'm a student. I'm a football player, right? I'm an athlete. What position do you play? Okay, you're offensive team member, right? There's a lot of things that you can categorize yourself as, and the president is the same thing. Just because he's a president doesn't mean he's not other things, right? LeBron James always says he's more than a what? More than an athlete, right? Because not only is he an athlete, right, but he's a father and an educator and other things. So just like that, we got the president, but he also has these other roles, and these roles are official. We're going to go through them real quick. So we know what the president can do, but what roles does the president have? Okay. The president roles: chief of state, chief executive, chief diplomat, commander-in-chief, chief legislator, party chief, and chief guardian of the economy. Chief of state, as the American chief of state, the president is a living symbol of the nation. So this is where a lot of people have issues with our current president, okay? You are the living symbol of the nation. And some people will say, well, I'm not voting for my president because I don't like their policy on this, right? But my grandma said, I don't want to vote for Donald Trump because he just seems mean. Now, on paper, is that a good reason not to vote for somebody? No. But let's face the reality here. The president is the living symbol of the nation, right? When other countries look, they look at our president. Celebrates national holidays, stands for the highest values and ideals of the country, does ceremonial duties. There's George Bush with the bunny. He's the chief executive. The president is boss. He's the boss. Everybody that works for the executive branch, he decides how the laws of the United States are to be enforced. He selects officials. He's the boss. The president decides how all of this operation runs. He's the boss. All Congress does is make laws, right? He's appointing everything else. FBI, CIA, Homeland Security, all that stuff the president is directly involved in. Chief diplomat decides what diplomats and ambassadors should say to foreign countries. So we've got somebody in Iran right now that lives there. They're our ambassador. And he appoints that person and also calls them and says, hey, when y'all meet up today, here's what you need to say, right? Here's how you need to deal with them. And if not, I'm going to come down and do it myself, blah, blah, blah. He appoints these people. Sets United States foreign policy. Golly, if you don't know what foreign policy is in this class by now, then I don't know what to tell you. But basically, policies are a list of rules, and foreign means not in this country. It's a list of rules. How are we going to go about handling foreign countries? Receives foreign dignitaries, represents the United States overseas, negotiates treaties. The president is in charge, is the commander-in-chief. We just talked about this. He's in charge of the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard. Okay? The president decides where troops are to be stationed and where ships are sent. He decides all of that. All military generals and admirals take orders from the president. Doesn't matter if you're the top dog in the military. If the president says push the big red button, you push the big red button. He's the commander-in-chief. Chief legislator. Constitution gives the president power to influence Congress and lawmaking. We kind of just talked about this. Presidents may urge Congress to pass new laws, but is the president directly involved in the lawmaking process? No. It's all Congress, right? He can use executive order in place of laws. We're going to get into the details of that. Party chief, this is easy. They're a Democrat, right? So Donald Trump is a Republican. Wouldn't you say because he's the president, he's probably the biggest guy in the party, right? Everybody in the party is probably reporting to him, okay? And if and when or how or whatever happens with our next president, be it Donald Trump or Joe Biden or the next one after or whatever happens, presumably Joe Biden, he would be the head of the Democratic Party at the time, right? Campaigns for those who have supported his policy. So Donald Trump, during the midterm elections, he's not up for re-election, but he went on a whole tour to go help out House of Representatives members, right? He said, "Oh, come see, Walter Jones, right? I'm gonna come to Walter Jones' rally and help him get elected, right? Because he wants more Republicans." Re-election campaigns for second term. So the president only ever campaigns twice. After you campaign your second time, you never got to do it again. It's probably really nice. The biggest one to most people, military, and we talked about foreign, military, and then the economy. Concern with unemployment, high prices, taxes, business profits, general prosperity of the country. The president does not directly control the economy. That wouldn't make any sense, right? The economy is controlled by the consumers, by the free market, but the president is supposed to help it run smoothly, right? And some people have conservative ideas on how to do that, and some have liberal ideas on how to do that. Meets with businesses and labor leaders to discuss their needs and problems. Let's say Ford wants to build a new factory to make cars. That's a big deal, right? You got to hire people to work there. You got to buy up land. You're making money. You're making it in America. Big deal, right? And what if they say, we're thinking about going to Mexico? Who's going to meet with them? The president. He's going to be like, why do you want to move to Mexico? What can I do to keep you here? We've got to, we want you here. We want you to boost our economy, not Mexico's economy, right? And so that's kind of the role of the president. He's talking to those businesses. And that's a really big deal when you're electing your president.